I've been to a lot of churches around the country, some intimately and some not, depending what my job required of me. Usually I was looking up here going, and I was just thinking about this. Now, if we were, and my bosses would always do this, I want speakers up there, on that beam up there, and I want some on the beam up there, and then up in there, and then we got to run a wire somehow to this amplifier in there, and the organ's up there, and okay, well, But anyway, we go into some churches, and I would look, and I wouldn't see a cross anywhere. I'd see emptiness. I'd see rows of seats. I would see a building, and I'd think, how do people know that this is a church? I don't see anything here that makes it look like a church at all. I don't see any stained glass. I don't see any banners. I don't see any hymn, whatever suggestions. I don't see an altar, railing. You know, I grew up Lutheran. I remember those days, sitting in my pew, checking off. Okay, done with that. Okay, 5 more things to do. Okay, check that off. And then the sermon was the longest. I was like, okay. Well, when that's done, then it just kind of flows very quickly after that. Pastor Janssen from Arundel Lutheran Church always had his sermon like later in the service. So we had to stay awake for that. So I grew up with all these things, reminders, symbols. As a human race, we need symbols to remind us of things. We need all these things. And people donate them, and they do beautiful work. And it all kind of brings it all the focal point to God, the worship of God, because this is what all this stuff is to symbolize. So when I go into these churches that have nothing, I think, what are they doing here anyway? And I don't see my predecessor, the guy that owned Rogers Organs before Stephen, used to do something with his speakers, and I've seen this up in front. There's no cross. So he put the speakers up front. What kind of an arrangement do you think he made up there? So he made a cross with the speakers in the front, just to let people know that this is a church. That's where you see the cross. Reformation Lutheran Church is an old congregation in Milwaukee, not far from where we live. It's on 35th, and I can't remember the name of the street, but it's south of North Avenue. Big old church. Had a lot of stuff going on. They had a place for the homeless to get clothes and food and all kinds of things. They just had a very vigorous ministry, but they couldn't afford to keep the building anymore, so they sold the building, and now they're at a storefront on 38th and Lisbon, which is not far, which is good for the community members, so they don't have to, from 35th to 38th, it's not that far to go differently. And I wonder, how is their ministry now? Because what happened to the stained glass, what happened to the banners and the cloth and everything else? What for them makes it a church? They're in a storefront. They could have a business next to them and another business next to them. What is it? Well, their ministry is thriving, despite the fact that it doesn't look like a church when you walk into it. I imagine they have some crosses and things they've imported. Maybe they even took an altar and put that in there too. Now, bring this back to Jesus' time, and he's wandering the countryside, and he does go to synagogue. That's important to him. It's the local congregations. But on this particular occasion, he goes to the temple, and something snaps inside of Jesus. He sees the people here making it almost mandatory to buy these doves, these sheep, these cattle for sacrifices. And I wonder if he's thinking, are they making this mandatory for them to go to worship? And if that's so, that's not right. Worship should be free. Worship should be free for everyone to enjoy, to be part of. You shouldn't have to pay money. It's like, in order for you to take communion, you got to give me $5, along with your card, and that's the only way you can take communion. Well, I think it frustrated him. Plus, I think there were people that got a little out of hand, the loan sharking, as some would say. I'll give you money, but then you got to give me, 50% extra or something. He was looking for a change. He was looking to get them back on track again and say, this is not the purpose of what we're doing. God asked for sacrifices before, but you're taking it way to a different level, and not a good one. And you're making it mandatory for people. It's almost like selling indulgences to get your loved one out of purgatory, or yourself out of purgatory. No, that's not going to work. So he tosses things. He gets rid of all the animals, the sacrificial animals. He gets rid of the money changers, So you're exchanging your money, getting the coins right so you can buy your sacrificial animals. You're missing the point, people. He's saying, you're missing the point. This is not what it's all about. What I find interesting, too, is they didn't cart him off for disturbing the peace. It makes me think was he in a rage, or was he just tossing tables and I don't know, because I asked him, why are you doing this? What sign can you give us for doing this? Well, you spent all this time on this precious temple of yours, which God didn't want in the first place, because David wanted to make it for him, and God said, David, no, I lived in tents. I'm everywhere. Don't. Well, then Solomon, of course, built it and continued on and on and on. So Jesus is saying, wait a minute, people. The temple is here. The presence of God is here. It's not in there. It's not in a matter of exchanging money for sacrifices that you have to do in order to worship and get close to God from the outer part of the temple so you can move to the next level into the temple and move into the temple. But no Holy of Holies, where the ark is, and only those Levites can go in there. Jesus said, you got to look at a new way of doing things. What I am and who I am, this is important. Because I'm the living, breathing, crying, angry, tired, I eat, I sleep. The presence of God within me, and what I do and who I am, now that trumps anything that goes on here. It's bigger and greater than that. So get your focus back on God and in the right direction. The Ten Commandments were a way of God of saying, now that I've taken you out of captivity in Egypt, I'm setting you free, and I'm going to give you some directions, the Ten Commandments, some guidelines for living, so that you can continue having me as your focal point. So I can create you as people of God, that you can move forward and bless the people that you come into encounter with. We've been in existence now for 175 years. That's a lot of time. When I see listserv and the Synod webpage has, different congregations have a group site that they can, put their things down, and they can say, we have this dinner going on, and I need whatever. And some of them saying, how old is your congregation? Mine's 75 years. Mine's 100. Mine's 125. I'm thinking, yeah. Yeah, 175. Beat that. And then you think, what have we done in 175 years? How many of those temples have we built and destroyed? And I'm not talking about physical things. Well, this is our third location, but I'm talking about ministry and missions. What have we created? What have we built? Very successful. Just a lot of meaning to it. And then what happened to them? After a while, did they lose their meaning? Did they lose focus? Did they lose energy? Was there a new direction that we decided to go? Whatever we did has worked. We created, we closed things, we stopped doing things, we created new things. We've been doing it for 175 years. We're continually creating meaning and mission and ministry to serve the people of our congregation and outside. That's the challenge. 175 years of wonderful ministry and mission. And now, what do we do now? And we're celebrating our reformation, our reforming, our renewal every year. Is Jesus turning the tables on some of our missions and ministries and saying, it's not working anymore. Do something else. Come up with something new. Something that'll speak to people. The people at Reformation are almost forced now to be in neighborhood because they're small, they're a storefront. They can't sit on their laurels of a beautiful building, and they've got to renew somehow. And they've had to. And we're fortunate enough that we can keep this going and keep it going, and we can be a vital part of the community. And there are a lot of creative people here to think of new ways of doing that, of going out into the world. It's the same God who breathed life and was at the creation, swirling around the mist, creating new things each day, resting on the seventh. It's the same God who pulled the people out of Egypt and said, "You're free now. This is who you're going to be, and this is the direction I'd like you to take." The same God who said to Noah, "I'm not going to destroy the world anymore, and this is my sign, the bow in the skies." The Abraham who said, "I'm going to give you and Sarah children. Just be patient. It's going to happen. My promises are always true." The same God who, in Jesus Christ, said, "I am the way and the life." Jesus and the Father are one. They're connected in a very meaningful way. We look to Jesus, and Jesus calls God Daddy. A very intimate relationship. And Jesus says, "You have that ability too. I give that to you, Daddy." Someone to be close to. A good father. A good parent. Same God who had Jesus rise from the cross to give us new life. To continually give us new life. When we celebrate that fact. Jesus turned the tables on things that weren't working anymore. The focal point, back to God. And that's what we constantly remind ourselves. That's what we're here for. Reminders all around us. Jesus, 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 God, focus. This is who we are. We're God's children, and God has claimed us in our baptisms, in our lives, in our spirit. Praise be to God. Amen.